What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to each and every one of you. We have to talk. It seems like there's a move happening, a power move throughout the world that may, in fact, leave South Africa completely exposed by the end of it. Now, a huge report came out just yesterday from the US State Department, specifically looking at human rights and human rights abuses throughout the world, not just South Africa. But their report on South Africa is incredibly telling. You start to put that together with a number of other reports from the US State Department, as specifically looking into human rights, into looking at things like kill the boer, kill the farmer, South Africa's government, the South African government's complicity, or shall we say, lack of interest in actually stopping farm murders. And I don't want to call them complicit. This would be hearsay at this point, but there's definitely something happening. It seems like there's a ball that is starting to roll downhill, and it's definitely being pushed by the United States. And then you start putting a bunch of other stuff together with that, and a clearer picture start to emerge. So let's talk about that. Now, this is the report for 2024. It always comes out about a year later because they need time to compile all of the data. But effectively, what's happening here, you can just read the executive summary to kind of get a broad overview, right? The human rights situation in South Africa significantly worsened during the year. With the signing of the expropriation bill on December the 20th, South Africa took a substantially worrying step towards land expropriation of Afrikaners and further abuses against racial minorities in the country. Significant human rights issues included credible reports of arbitrary and unlawful killings, arbitrary arrest or detention, and the repression of racial minorities. The government did not take credible steps to investigate, prosecute, or punish officials who committed human rights abuses, including inflammatory racial rhetoric against Afrikaners and other racial minorities, or violence against racial minorities. That's just the summary. When you actually start going through this, you find, for example, extrajudicial killings. This is, in other words, killings that's done without judicial support. So the government never said, the law never said this person deserves to die. This is just the police taking matters into their own hands. And they actually find a number, and they use data from South Africa itself, right? So they don't invent any of this data themselves. They just look at all the watchdogs throughout South Africa operating in South Africa, as well as government departments, to find that people, at least 40 criminal suspects, were killed during shootouts with literally no one paying for it. So the big problem here for them is that after stuff like this happens, it doesn't seem like the government has any real interest in punishing the people who are involved in the killings. Because yes, shootouts will happen, but then usually following that in any normal country, the police would be placed on administrative leave while the case is investigated to find whether or not this police officer acted within the bounds and scope of the law. What they don't find in South Africa, most of these police officers are sort of put on special leave with pay and then brought back a couple of weeks later to just go, yeah, cool, keep going, keep killing. Okay, so a lot of stuff there. I'm not going to go through all of this because it's a lot of writing, but effectively, all you need to know about this report really is if there's stuff written under the header, it's bad, right? So freedom of the press, for example, this is a very interesting one because there's another report that I'll go to in a second. But in freedom of the press, they do find that the state kind of allows for free speech and kind of allows for freedom of the press. Nevertheless, law permitted authorities to restrict reporting on security forces, prisons, and mental institutions. This is a problem, obviously, for the Americans. Then they go on to say, civil society groups complained of intimidation or harassment for expressing opinions or publishing articles critical of political parties and figures. In May, the president signed into law the Preventing and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill. The offense of hate speech applied to any person who intentionally published, propagated, advocated, shared, or communicated to one or more persons in a manner that could reasonably be construed to demonstrate a clear intention to be harmful or to incite harm or to promote or propagate hatred. Now, you might ask, wait, but didn't we just read something that would literally be that? Yes, this is exactly it, right? This report, the entire point of this report, when you read through it, is the United States gathering evidence against South Africa. The fact that this law was signed and the fact that they make mention of this law here, because remember, they're trying to say that people aren't that free, but now they're saying that actually, civil society groups actually said this was a good law, right? And that this is great. The problem is that under this bill, under this hate speech bill, someone like Julius Malema should be in jail because he is propagating hate purely for the sake of hate, and he is willing his supporters to commit violence and murder against the white minority of South Africa. And yet this is not happening, right? So what the Americans are doing effectively is saying, hold up, we don't think that you guys are passing these laws in order to police everyone equally. Because you read through a lot of this report and the same stuff start to sort of point out or start to sort of jump out at you where the government does not apply their rules equally to everyone. Everyone is sort of viewed under a different lens. And you go, for example, to this report here. US lawmakers have expressed growing concern about the subversion of press freedom in South Africa by the country's state security agency. And in this, they're specifically focused on News 24, right? Congressional leaders from both the Republicans and Democrats expressed grave concern about several cases in which whistleblowers are being targeted by SASA, working hand in glove with journalists from News 24, a digital media platform owned by Naspers and Proces listed in Amsterdam. Now, what's very interesting about this, they're looking specifically at a story involving Sai and a whistleblower that came out and spoke about some of the stuff that's happening here and how News 24, instead of actually reporting the story, decided to attack the whistleblower. The same happened, if you guys remember, when AfriForum went to America to talk to Trump about the stuff, the challenges that white people are facing in the country. What did News 24 do? They lied. They openly twisted the truth and made AfriForum the evil guys, the bad guys. The same with Rob Hersov. He became the bad guy for speaking out, and they actively were found to twist and lie about it, right? This is what the press ombudsman found. News 24 was forced to issue an apology and a retraction of their story as a result of just outright fabricating evidence, lying and misleading the public on what actually are the facts. Now, according to US lawmakers, they actually think that News 24 is bought and paid for by state security agencies. This would be severely troubling, right? But effectively, what this report says, if you go through the whole thing, and reading through it is quite the slog. It's a lot of writing and a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of things where we don't seem to be really guilty of anything, at least. They do find some issues with our labor laws. When you look at the worker rights here, for example, they do make mention, although the Congress of South African Trade Unions, the country's largest labor federation, was a member of the tripartite alliance with the ANC and the South African Communist Party. And then they do make mention of this. The Minister of Labor had the authority to extend agreements by majority employers, one or more registered employers organization that represented 50% plus one of workers in a sector and labor representatives in sector-specific bargaining councils to the entire sector. So even businesses that aren't labor or worker rights controlled would still have to suddenly adhere to these new rules, even if they were not invited to actually participate in any of these discussions, which, again, points to America being very, very iffy about what South Africa is doing. Now, of course, as you can imagine, the South African government immediately came out and said, erroneous, lies, Your Honor, lies, completely made up. This is just not true. We didn't do any of this stuff, which, of course, is just bollocks, right? But, of course, the ANC is going to say this. Now, why I say this is more troubling than I think people realize. Trump is said to meet with Putin at a U.S. military base in Anchorage, right, in Alaska. This will be their first face-to-face meeting. Trump is clearly busy with a plan. The plan is gaining speed. The fact that we've seen the U.S. State Department now investigate South Africa twice, and both times they were very, very damning. the fact that Trump has taken significant aim specifically at BRICS, but then there's a couple of countries in the BRICS nations that are getting special attention. South Africa is one of those countries. You'll notice Trump doesn't go nearly as hard on Brazil. They got slapped with tariffs and stuff, but outside of that, Trump doesn't really care. South Africa is the big boy, right? We're getting really bullied by Trump at the moment. And I use this in the best word possible because Trump needs to put pressure on this government of ours. It's a good thing. But why? What exactly is the purpose? Well, I think Trump and the United States are looking for regime change. I think that's what's happening here. They're looking to dial up the pressure gauges on South Africa to the point where either the people themselves demand a new regime to come into effect, or to the point where it becomes necessary for the world to intervene in South Africa's affairs should the government become significantly bad at what they're doing. The fact that Trump is set to meet with Putin, all of this, I think, is for one goal and one goal only. Well, actually, there might be two goals. The first is to isolate China. And as long as South Africa and India and Russia are playing ball, China is not isolated. Trump wants China isolated. The second is to get South Africa back on the side of the West. Now, for anyone thinking, well, why would the Americans even care? Well, South Africa is blessed in many ways with location. It's location, 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 baby. And South Africa has the location. We're in a prime position that whoever controls South Africa or whoever has South Africa's friendship basically has access to the entirety of the world unrestricted. It is the only natural port that would need to be used if you want to sail across the world without using any of the canals that can oftentimes break down, can oftentimes have issues. And a lot of those canals happen to be in very hostile, or shall we say, unstable areas where a lot of things can go wrong. And should they go wrong, South Africa will once again just become the port of access for all ships throughout the world. The last thing America and Europe wants is South Africa in the hands of the Eastern powers of the world. Much better to have it in the hands of the West, not to mention he who controls South Africa controls the southern hemisphere of the world, because South Africa is location-wise the greatest country there is. We're also blessed with a lot of farmland. We produce a lot. We have a lot of minerals. We have oil. We have gas. We have everything you need. This is a country that can be a great friend to anyone, but we need a better government. We need a government that actually wants to be friends with the rest of the world. And I think that's what Trump is aiming at. That is ultimately the game. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about this. Please consider hitting that like button if you like what I do and you want more people to see honest and rational conversations and the news. Trying to be as unbiased in my facts as possible, but biased in my opinions because they're my opinions. That's how it works. Please consider hitting the like button, the subscribe button, and also leaving a comment in the comment section down below. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons and the YouTube channel members. Without you, what I do would not be possible. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. To become a member or a patron, just hit the link in the description down below or click the little button right below this video. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. A peace.